Richard on, man. Welcome to Dad Edge, my friend.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
I am too. And we have a special guest. What's up, dude?
What's up?
Why don't you tell the audience who you are? I think they know you by voice, maybe, but just in case.
I'm Ethan, and um, this is my dad.
They might know me. I don't know. I've been in their ears for 7 years. But Richard, man, this is so cool having you on the podcast. Obviously, the guys know who you are from the intro before the show. But really, where I want to start out with you is your childhood and maybe the
Mm,
relationship you have with your parents, your own father growing up, and just maybe some life lessons that you learned growing up.
sure. Yeah. Um, wow. I mean, I grew up close to the rest of the guys in Gaithersburg, Maryland, which is down the street from Rockville. I know Rockville is kind of like what everyone claims the band to be from. Um, Jerry's from Ohio, obviously, so he didn't grow up where we grew up. But my childhood for the most part, I thought my parents were great. I thought they worked really hard. Um, I think culturally there was some things that were a struggle. My dad was born here, so on his side of the family, I think I'm like fourth generation American-born Chinese. Um, and on my mom's side, she came from the Philippines, even though she's Chinese. Um, so she moved over here in her early 20s. So culturally, it was just kind of this strange thing where she was really trying to push uh, the Asian Chinese culture on our childhood, which I thought was great. But at the same time, my dad was so Americanized that it was kind of this clashing of expectations, right?
Mm,
Um, so I think with that being said, when I got older and I started making some decisions on whether or not I wanted to finish school or go out and pursue being a musician and pursue my dreams of being in a band with my friends, um, that kind of butt heads right there. But that's kind of like fast forwarding. But growing up, I thought that they were great parents. They had hardships just like a lot of other parents, just, fighting at times and dealing with just trying to, they're in the weeds. I think when you're growing up and you got kids, sometimes the focus of just trying to get things done and just getting through all that is really hard. I experienced that in my marriage. Um, but I think for the most part, I thought they were really supportive in anything I wanted to do. I think ultimately they just wanted me to be successful.
hmm
And if you tell your parents that I'm going to go join a rock band, that math doesn't really add up, right? So, um, and I hid the band from them for a long time, um, because I was afraid that they were going to think that I was going in the wrong direction of success, right? Um, so, yeah, I think ultimately they just wanted a better life
Sure.
for their kids than what they had. And granted, we grew up in a middle class family, um, but all they knew was work, work, work. You know, it wasn't about following your passion per se. My dad was an aerospace engineer, and he did kind of pursue that, but eventually it just turned into like, well, what's safe? The government's safe. What gives good benefits? Government gives good benefits. Um, every year there's a guarantee, not a guarantee, but if you keep working hard, you get to the next level and you make more money. Get to the next level, make more money. And I think that's kind of where their mindset was. Being a musician and them also pushing music was kind of odd because I'm like, well, you're pushing me to like learn music and then I'm passionate about it, but at the same time, that's not what you want me to do because that's not going to be successful. Um, so I think there was some confusion there on, passion doesn't always equal success, and which one do you choose, success or passion?
Mm, got it.
Um, so I know I'm jumping all over the place. But I think ultimately what any parent wants is just your kid to be successful. And do I want my kids to be musicians? If they really want to try, then yeah, I'll support that. My kids play hockey. They both think they're going to the NHL, right?
Right.
Is that possible? Maybe. Um, but they're willing to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go to lessons, and they're not complaining about that. So they're passionate about it. I know that, for sure. So I'm gonna nurture that, and I'm gonna feed that as long as they're passionate about it.
You know, I love where we're starting here because the theme that I'm really pulling out here is that as a parent, right? And Ethan, you and I have kind of had this discussion because Ethan's dream actually ever since he saw you guys in concert, 5 years ago, that when he saw Jerry play, that's when he picked up the saxophone. He was like, man, this is so cool. And now here we are 5 years later. Well, why don't you just share just some of the musical things you've done just in the past 5 years?
Well, when sixth grade started, I signed up for band. I played the trombone at first. I didn't really like it, but I really liked band. I was like, I really like this, but I don't want to quit band, but maybe I could switch instruments. So I did. I switched to saxophone. I was like, this is so much better. And I thought it was gonna be harder because of all the keys and stuff, but it isn't. It's a lot easier than I thought. And then I picked up more instruments on the way. Like when middle school started, I played like guitar, bass, piano, all that stuff. And now I'm in high school and I want to pursue music is my dream.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so cool, man. And so I want to pose a question here real quick to you and let you just gel on it while I just sort of share a quick reflection on what you just talked about, growing up and what that environment felt like. The question I have for you is, what age were you when you first picked up guitar? And then the age you were at where you're like, you know what? I might really be able to do something with this, if I go in this direction. And I know that my parents are wanting me to kind of play it safe, but
Mhm.
I'm really feeling this, and what that transition felt like for you at that age. So gel on that for a second, but just reflecting on parenting, right? And the biggest thing that we want to do as parents, right? And you and I have talked about this is we want to protect our kids. We want to keep them safe, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes what we do is we swing that pendulum in such a far way of like, hey, just play it safe, get a comfortable job with benefits and guaranteed paycheck, and that's playing it safe, right? On the flip side of that, Ethan, you and I have had discussions around this where I told him that I think what would be fantastic is go all in on your dream. And I actually reference you guys, OAR, as a reference point for this because you all graduated from Ohio State, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I've told Ethan, and Nikki Six said this too. He's like, every band needs a businessman. Every band needs a brain. So I told Ethan, I was like, what would it look like if you went to a college, the college of your choice, and you just went all in on band and playing your instruments and that kind of thing, but you also got your degree. And then that way, from a business standpoint, if you make it, right, you could be what Nikki Six talks about. I think even Mark came on and said the same thing, that you need somebody or several people in the band that have a stable brain about them and business sense and some
Mhm.
sort of strategy that's involved with that. But I honestly think that you can have the best of both worlds, by
Mhm.
doing that. And I think your particular journey is fascinating to me because you guys kind of did that yourselves. But going back to the question, when you first picked up guitar and you're like, man, like this is an incredible thing that I just love. And then that point where it transitioned of like, I think I might be able to do something with this.
Yeah. I started playing guitar around 11 or 12. And I actually played classical piano for like 8 years before that.
Wow. I didn't know.
So in my household, it was either you were going to play something, and you're either going to play the violin or you're going to play the piano. And my aunt was a piano teacher. So my mom's sister was a piano teacher, and free piano lessons, right? So that was the obvious choice And I did like piano. I did enjoy playing it. The problem was I couldn't sight read with my left hand as well as my right hand. So I had to memorize everything because I would slow down my piano pieces because my left hand was trying to catch up with my right hand if I was going to sight read it. So I ended up just memorizing all my stuff, right? And that's kind of already like a very rock and roll thing to do because the music that we play now, we don't write anything down. It's all by feel and it's all by memory. So um, I would learn these pieces and I would kind of feel the way I thought the song should go. And sometimes that was great because I was on the same page as, and I'm not saying I'm playing anything like crazy, crazy. Granted, I started when I was like 3 or 4. But then as I got older, some of these like Mozart or Beethoven classical pieces, I would hear them kind of my own way. And so if I'm memorizing it and I'm not playing what's exactly on there, then sometimes I'll play something a little bit different or I'll swing the beat or I'll feel like, you know, this chord change or these two notes together sounds better this way. And I was already kind of like improvising my own version of that. And classical music is the opposite of that, right? You are playing it true to the respect of the composer who wrote that piece. So right away, that was a problem when I was playing. And that's what led me to guitar because I didn't feel like I had the freedom to do these things or play these songs the way I heard them. And funny story, the way that I quit, I was terrified of my aunt because she was just I don't know, you just think of a vicious piano teacher and she was a vicious piano teacher. Um, and I probably got more crap from her because we were family. That she can get away with something. Um, but ultimately, she's the one who pushed me into music and really kind of made me understand the little theory that I know, right? Um, so I actually had to force her to fire me from my piano lessons because I was too scared to quit. And my brother, who was also taking piano lessons, he was like, "I'm sick of this. This is ridiculous. I want to learn guitar." So he started playing guitar, and he's actually the one who kind of contrived this plan for me to quit taking piano lessons. And so basically, he had this whole plan for me to flub this recital on purpose, which I did. And she was so upset with me that she ended up saying that she didn't want to teach me anymore because I was a disgrace, or however you want to put it. She was so embarrassed. I was like her star student, right? So ultimately, the plan worked. And I got out of piano lessons because I was too scared to quit. So she fired me. And then I started picking up the guitar. And my brother, he was listening to Zeppelin, a lot of classic rock stuff, Hendrix, of course, and he started teaching me things. My brother's a natural musician. Like I would have to really practice something to play it. I'd be like, "Hey, check this out," and he's like, "Oh, like this," and he would just play it. I was like, "Oh my God, this is like this is way harder than I thought it was because I can't memorize everything. Like I'm trying to learn all these pieces now or all these guitar riffs." Um, so, anyways, that's how I kind of got into guitar. I was coming from a classical background and being frustrated and not being able to play things the way I heard them. Frustrated that my left hand was slowing down my right hand. And then when I got the guitar, I realized there's no bass clef, so it was all treble clef. So sight reading came a lot easier, and that was a plus too. But that's what led me to guitar, and it was the energy of kind of the rock and pop music that my brother was handing down to me. My first concert was with Mark, and I think we were in, gosh, we were young, 8th grade, maybe. A band called Fugazi. Have you heard of Fugazi?
I haven't. Have you heard of that? No.
I think so.
Hardcore band out of DC. DC had a pretty strong hardcore scene. Black Flag, Fugazi. Anyways, Fugazi were kind of considered hometown heroes here, and they had a free concert that they hosted every year. I didn't even know who Fugazi was, and Mark was like, "Hey, do you want to go to this concert?" And I was like, "Sure." How are we going to get down there? He's like, "Well, let's see if we can take the metro." And so our parents somehow let us at 12 go down to DC, which was a
Wow.
45-minute subway ride. And we found our way, got off, found our way to the front of the stage, got there hours early, thinking that that's what you do to find a good spot. And next thing we know, we turn around and there's like thousands of people behind us, and we're just up against this barricade. I was like, "Oh, I wonder what this band sounds like." Fugazi starts playing, and I'm like, "Okay, this is pretty crazy. The energy that this band is putting out is like nothing I've ever seen. It's almost like a fight, right? Like a brawl." Um, and I'm like, well, "This is great." And next thing we know, we're kind of like moving around, and we can't control the way we're moving because the whole crowd is moving, and we're like in a full blown mosh pit within like 5 minutes. And I just remember like crawling, trying to get out of there, just getting hit and banged up, and finally getting out of that massive crowd. And I just remember like just being beat up and saying that was, I've never felt anything like that before. And ever since then, I was just like, wow, to be in a band and to kind of create that energy. I don't necessarily want to sound like them, but the energy that they put out was something that I'll never forget. And then from there, other bands started influencing me. Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
Uh, Mark wanted to put a band together too. Him and Chris grew up even elementary school together, and so Chris was playing drums, Mark was singing. We had an opportunity for the eighth grade talent show, and they asked me to join the band because they knew that I was playing guitar on the side. And then we did some Pearl Jam covers, um, and then from there we found Benj and we added him. And at that point, we were of a revolution, and that was when I started realizing there was something magical playing with these three other guys. I didn't really know like what that like. I've never been in any other bands, right? So I just knew that we were writing songs that were fun to play, And I just remember that we were writing songs the way that we heard them rather than covering something that was written hundreds of years ago by some classical composer. So that was a real uh, liberating feeling to be able to play our songs and write our songs together in Chris's basement. So, um, and then we just wanted to keep the band going, and people really liked what we were doing, and that led us to choose to go to school together. Um, and we all ended up at Ohio State at different times. We were all kind of like in different levels of of graduating and getting there. Benj was a year younger, so the three of us were up there before Benj got there. And eventually Benj was like, "I applied, I got in, I'm coming to Ohio State." We got the full band back together. Um, and during that time, we were still doing shows like acoustically and kind of telling everyone, "Yeah, we really have this band." But no one really believed us because we couldn't play together because Benj wasn't there yet. And then finally, when he got there, it was awesome. So
That is so cool, man. I always love hearing. I want to give the next question to Ethan here. And while he gels on that, I love hearing the origin story of how these things come to life, right? And how they come to fruition. And I love the example that you shared of being at that rock concert and seeing like the energy,
mm,
I don't want to speak for you, Ethan, but, I just remember, I'll share this with you here real quick, Richard.
mm,
I went through a pretty horrific experience in 2017. I know what happened now looking back on it, but um, I hit 33 days of the worst insomnia I've ever had in my life. And I didn't know it at the time. I was actually training for like this kind of ultra event, and completely fried out my adrenals. And I didn't know it. I just know I couldn't sleep.
Mm,
And I was only sleeping an hour and a half, 2 hours a night for 33 straight days. And it was like literally 33 days of absolute hell. My doctor was telling me, he's like, if you don't get this straightened out, you're going to die. I'm not kidding.
mm,
You're either going to have a stroke or a heart attack or something. I lost 25 pounds, landed myself in the hospital for 4 days. It was awful. And that was a silver lining for me as a husband, man, and father of, a lot of my stuff that I wear says live legendary, and that's the tagline for Dad Edge. And it was at that moment I was like, I'm not going to leave anything on the table anymore, because I
mm,
realize now how fragile life is and what could have probably happened. And it was that moment that we started doing like what we called like epic adventures. Like, we're leaving nothing on the table. And that OAR concert, I was like, we're going to this concert and we're sitting in the front row. I was like, because that's what living legendary is. And I use that as an example because for you, Ethan, and again, I want to give you the next question here, is that's when I saw that shift in you as well. It was like that concert that clicked, and you were like, holy cow, like I want to do something with music. And it was from then out, that was, I feel like that's when your journey kind of started. But I would like to give you the next question to ask Richard, if you like.
Yeah, I'm curious. What's like your favorite thing that you really love about like just playing with like the band?
Good question.
my favorite thing is when we take a risk on stage, because we don't play the songs the same way, and we don't play the same songs over and over again. Um, Sometimes that can bite you in the ass, but when you can figure it out, and usually we can because we've been playing for so long and we know each other's musical language, um, that the reward of that, when you can pull it off, especially when it seems like things are going off the rails and you're trying to bring the song back because you took a risk to do something, or someone started doing something and everyone decided to follow that person or that idea, um, and without saying anything to each other and just kind of looking at each other in the eyes and then figuring out a way out of that, not just figuring it out but taking it to another level where that level is such a jump that the whole audience feels it too. It's not just you on stage. Sometimes we feel stuff on stage and it just kind of goes over the audience's head, right? That's okay. But when the whole place can feel that we all landed on that bullseye together, and we look at each other and we smile and we haven't even said one word, um, that's like the greatest feeling ever, right? I think ultimately, like, I look at the band as like a team, right? We all had aspirations to be athletes, and I think if you ask any musician, they all wanted to be professional athletes, and if you ask any professional athlete, they all wanted to be in a band. At least all my friends who play in, football or hockey professionally, they, baseball, they all are just like, man, we, they all play a little guitar, they all play a little bit of something, and then, for whatever reason, they went this way or that way, and um, so I look at it as a team sport. You know what I mean? If I were to get up there with my guitar by myself, I mean, I just have anxiety like saying that, right? Um, I couldn't see myself doing that, and I think that's a separate type of artist, a separate type of mindset. I think when we go up there, we huddle before every show and we get our heads together as a team. And when we get up there, even if someone's having a solo or someone's having a moment, our mindset is what can we play to support that moment, that person, that solo. I know for like when Jerry takes a sax solo, I'm thinking in my head, what should I not play? Right. Um, what can I do to give him space to put out what he hears in his head without getting in his way? I mean, you think about it like you're handing off the ball to your running back, right? You want to create a path for him to get the first down or to get to the end zone. And I think that's our mindset. You know, how can we help that person shine at that moment? So being able to pull those things off and be able to talk to each other without talking to each other is my favorite thing about being on stage with the guys.
Wow, that's really cool.
You know what's so funny is we actually counted how many times we've seen you guys now. Because you guys by far, and I'm not just saying this because you're on the show, but you by far are our favorite band to go watch and play. I think it's 7 or 8 times now. But now that you mentioned that, I know I've seen it now. Like because you can see because we always sit so close because we do that with just about every concert. Like we're just like, we're not going to sit in the back, we're going to sit as close as we can. But you get a very different view and perception of the show. You get to see like that interactive non-spoken chemistry between you guys. So I think I know exactly what you're talking about because I'm pretty sure I've seen it, in you guys and that chemistry. That's super cool. I want to switch gears just a little bit because I know you're raising two young men, 10 and 8, Grayson and Dean. You're married. The thing that I'm always so fascinated to know is that one of the hardest things for a man, husband, and father to do is to, and I hate even using this word, balance, because there is no such thing, right? There's more integration, optimization. But for you, everybody wants a piece of you. Right. I mean, all you have to do is probably open your phone and you have probably 20, 30, 40 demands on your hand of something that is garnering for your attention. Also you're on tour, you are a creator, right? So you're constantly creating new pieces, new music. And there's a dichotomy there that a lot of people who are obviously in the limelight and in high demand and could easily get sucked down the wormhole of things that have their attention that maybe shouldn't at certain seasons or certain times. But for you, how have you been able to integrate marriage, raising two young men, as well as being a musician?
Wow. It's always a work in progress.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to win at that. I don't even think it's like winning. I think it's figuring out when you have to shift a little bit over here and adjust this, adjust your focus and your attention and your love. To be honest, it's like, I'm not trying to be arrogant. To be a good father comes really natural to me, right? Like it's very, and that kudos to my parents for kind of instilling that to me. Like, and I think a lot of my attention goes to my kids, and I don't know if that's guilt of just being gone a lot or, but that's a very natural nurturing instinct for me.
I can see that.
To be a good husband is hard because I feel like I am giving my kids so much attention that I don't realize when I need to shift that to be a good husband. So I think that's my personal struggle in that balancing act, that juggling act is, knowing when to change my focus to my wife. I think we've been together for so long that I think that, oh, she's good. She's fine. She's a trooper. She's been through so much. You got to be able to, even though you think that, or she's showing that, you still have to read between the lines. And even if it seems like she doesn't want that attention or want that love, I think everybody wants that, you know.
That is such
So
a
I mean, that's just my personal experience. I
yeah,
know some dads who I'm just like, man, you should probably spend more time with your kids, or and
yeah.
granted, you can father however you want to father. Who am I to tell you, how to be a good father, and who am I to judge? But there are times where it's the other way, So I think, like you said, it's just kind of realizing, where to focus, because it's impossible to focus on everything all at the same time. It's just, it's all about just adjusting and realizing who needs what, um, in certain moments.
I think that is so well said. And to be quite honest, I appreciate, man, your authenticity, because you could probably say just about anything and everybody would believe you, you know?
Mhm.
And I had Matthew McConaughey on the podcast a couple of years ago, and I asked him a question, and anybody would believe anything he says, and I asked him, I said, how do you keep your marriage fresh? How do you constantly pursue Camilla and make her feel loved and seen and heard and all that stuff, and balancing everything that you're doing with your kids?
Mm.
And you could tell he was like, oh, he's like, you know what? He goes, you asking me that question just triggered me and made me realize that I've been really not good at that this season. He's like,
Mm.
I've been so busy with Sing 2 and the kids' activities, and I've always kind of view her as like, she's good. She, we're a team. We're raising
Yeah.
these kids together. We're traveling, and I got this going on. He's like, but you know what? I'm going to take her out on a date this weekend. And
Mm.
you're right. It is a very hard balance. I mean, Ethan, you know this. I want to give you the next question, by the way. But there are some times, raising raising two boys, there's really no difference in the amount of attention that the kids need, whether you have two, three, four, five, right? They all need your attention, and you have to somehow integrate and balance that dichotomy. And there are times where I've been guilty where, just the other night, uh, mom was gone for the weekend with the two littles, and you and I and Mason were here together, and you came up to me, and Ethan's two favorite words at the end of every day is "let's talk," because he loves to talk about his day. And Ethan goes, "Hey, is there any way we could talk tonight?" And Jessica is like, "I want to hang out with dad tonight. Like, I haven't seen him in like 3 days." And it didn't even hit my radar that, like, man, I really have not spoken to my wife in like 3 or 4 days. Like,
Yeah.
and we haven't caught up. And that was like a trigger for me to be like, and I told Ethan, I was like, you know what? I need to hang out with mom tonight. And you understood that. But you're right. I mean, there are some times where we go so hard as dads, right? In
Mm.
one direction. Sometimes it could be in our marriage, or sometimes it could be in parenting. And then suddenly we're like, holy crap, pump the brakes. Okay, this person needs some attention over here, or that person needs this right now. And then you have to bob and weave, but it's like this delicate dance. Um,
Yeah.
did you want to ask a question?
Um, how difficult can it be, like raising a family and doing music, being on tour all the time?
Great, good question.
So when we had Grayson, this was in March, and we already had a big summer tour planned. And I had to leave 3 months after he was born. Um, Being new parents, my wife was a new mother. I think you don't really know how hard it is until, I think that's all dependent on the kid too, but the baby. But I left, and it was extremely hard. She was just kind of on her own. And I think there's different phases of what's hard at the time. And then it was just, you have a newborn, feeding, not sleeping, you're a zombie, you're by yourself. Um, and also the part of like, oh, do I really need help? I said I could do this. Um, I want to do this. That was my goal, to get through this, right? So I think that was really hard. Like for me, he wasn't really depending on me. He didn't really know who I was, right? So um, mom was really important, and that was like kind of like the only thing that was that he needed at the time. So fast forward as the kids get older, well, Grayson got older. We had our second Dean, and it was a pretty common thing that we would just tour every summer, right? So I think after some reps of kind of going through, well, this is the time of the year where I got to leave. My wife was a pro, is a pro, figured it out, got through it. Not to say it was easy, but it was just kind of something that we were just used to going through, right? My kids were still young. Oh, this is the time that daddy leaves. He comes home a couple times a week. This is how it is. And then he's home a lot, right? And then fast forward, I guess leading up to the pandemic, the last time we did a big summer tour was 2018, 19, maybe. And then the pandemic hit, and I was home. And that time being home, as hard as it was for our industry and then any touring artist, not just ours, I mean everyone, right? Um, I dove headfirst into just being as present as possible. And the whole identity thing kind of came up again because it was just like, well, I know I'm a dad, I know I'm a musician, and I'm in this band, and everyone thinks me with the band, and that's kind of like what I thought, who I thought I was. And all of a sudden that just stops, right? So I was trying to figure out, I kind of had this empty feeling, not just because I was missing playing with the guys and all that, but I'm just like, wow, I'm like, I'm not really that guy in the band anymore, right? Because we're not doing anything, right? There's nothing to like establish that anymore. And granted, we were working in other ways, but like just being on stage and the rewarding feelings that we were talking about, just being with the guys and having those moments, were gone. Um, so with that being said, that was tough. But then to fill kind of that void, I kind of went into like super dad mode where I'm gonna like do. My kids were playing hockey. I never grew up playing hockey. I played basketball, played soccer growing up. In fact, I didn't want them to play hockey because uh, it sounded really expensive, and you need like a sheet of ice to do the sport. To me, I was just like, this is crazy. Like, why do you like we could just take a ball and just go outside. You don't even need shoes. We could just like play soccer, whatever, play basketball. But they were really in it and they loved it. And I could skate with them because I grew up in the 90s and I could rollerblade like crazy and do tricks and all this stuff. But hockey, I never played street hockey really, so sticking a puck was like totally foreign to me. So I could skate with the kids and all that. But as the pandemic hit and I had much more time, I was like, you know what? Like, this is an opportunity to like really dive headfirst and like figure this out, and then I can play with the kids. We can go to stick and shoots and do all this stuff. And um, so I ended up taking adult like learn to play hockey with a bunch of other dads. And skating was great. I mean, you got to know how to skate, right? So that's more than half the battle right there. But just figuring out stick handling and all that stuff, that helped. And then next thing I know, I'm playing in a beer league, right? I'm talking the bottom of the barrel of the beer, like the D league. So we are, I don't want to say I am so bad, right? Probably like the second worst player on the team. Not the first, the second. Um, but with that being said, next thing I know, I'm coaching my kids' hockey team. I'm one of the assistant coaches, right? So really just going so hard into like the hockey thing and figuring that out. And then we come out of the pandemic and we make a record, and we have a great touring partner with Dispatch and G Love, and we put the tour on sale, venues, 43 cities. It was going to be a lot, right? I knew that. So I'm trying to talk to my kids about that and just kind of what that's going to look like. And we had a one-off in Milwaukee, a private show in Milwaukee. This was back in April, and I was gone for 2 days. And also the way flights are happening right now in airlines, like we used to fly in like the day of the show because you could, and you would just get there. If you have to miss sound check because you have something, a prior commitment or whatever, and you can get there, then as long as you can get there, and flying the day of show, usually it was fine. But now with airlines delays and all that, now you have to fly the day before, because unless you can drive there, right? So if it's within 6 hours of where I live, then and I can rent a car and I can get there, then and I have to fly the day of because I have a prior engagement or a commitment, then I'll do that. But if I can't get there by car, then I have to fly the night before. And then if that gets canceled, then you can figure out the next day, and hopefully it all works out. It usually does. But with that being said, that changes everything from one show, flying in that day and flying out and spending the night there, to 2 nights, right? Because you got to fly the day before, then you play the show, and then usually the show ends so late, you got to fly back the next morning. So we had this one gig. I'm about to leave, and my oldest is like bawling, like completely bawling, so sad. And I was like, Grayson, I was like, I'm just I'm just leaving for a couple days. And then in the back of my head, I was like, I'm leaving for like 3 months, like this coming summer. And if this is hurting you this bad right now or making you this sad, I'm like, I gotta, I gotta figure out how to like soften the summer tour with him. Um, and I knew right away after that, though, that like this was going to be a tough summer for him. And my youngest, I think he was upset too, but he's less vocal about it, and he has, um, he's not really in that headspace where, oh, dad was here a lot and now he's not here. And I think that's kind of like, so he's 8, and so when Grayson was 7, right before the pandemic hit, it was just like that's just what dad does, you know what I mean? So, but leading up to the summer, it got really hard to leave. Um, and he's also at the age where he's 10, so he can talk about his feelings and he can express why he's sad, and it's it's definitely more impactful on me hearing that from him at that age. So, Ethan, getting back to your question after talking too much, um, this summer was a struggle for sure, and I think the FaceTime is amazing, right? That's something that we never had before, being able to see each other's faces and all that. Of course, it's not the same as being able to hug your kids and actually being physically present with them. Um, but that always helps. But I think in general, you just have to get home as much as you can, right? It's really easy to not travel on a day off because you're exhausted from 4 shows in a row or 5 shows, whatever it is. And the thought of getting on a plane and flying across the country and then having to get on a plane to fly all the way back, or getting on a red eye, it's real easy just to be like, it's just one day, right?
Yeah.
So that one day can really kind of hit the reset button for your kids, and it also shows them that you're committed, right? Like, any chance I get, it is what it is. I have to leave, right? We have to accept that. But the days that I can come home, and whenever I can, I will come home, right? Um, and I mean, that's hard in a lot of ways because physically it's really hard. And then it's almost like, well, if you're going to come home and you're going to be tired and you're not going to be present and you're just kind of checked out because you're physically exhausted, then it's just like, why come home at all, right? So I think leading up to that and just being healthy, and we all try to stay fit on the road. We all work out together. We all have a truck that turns into this boxing gym when all the gear is out of it, and we hang a heavy bag, and we got battle ropes and kettlebells, and
That's awesome.
we push each other, and I think that really helps, just try to keep your energy going when the tank's empty. including performing, but also including coming home and getting through flights and getting through travel and all that. Granted, there are some days where it just didn't make sense because the amount of time that I would be home and I would have to leave, it didn't add up. And you could say, yeah, those 5 hours would have been perfect, but it actually sometimes messes up the rhythm of what my wife has planned or what's going on with the way that she's handling things. So I think that's a conversation too that we have, like, hey, I want to come home. Is that helpful? Is that not helpful?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's this year was different. It had a lot of ups and a lot of downs, and but just trying to be positive and trying to be present whenever you can. you know
What's so cool about that entire perspective is the beautiful thing that I love about this podcast with interviewing men, husbands, and fathers, and your fans. They see you in this perception and this maybe even like labeling, right? Of like, oh, OAR is this and Richard is this. And, the cool thing I think about this podcast is that we get to see this incredible side of you that's very personal and a beautiful side of people that we otherwise wouldn't. And just a couple of reflections, and I just have one more question for you. There was something that really emerged for me just as a feeling and as a thought the last time we saw you guys here in St. Louis. And that was the first time I ever brought my 8-year-old to a concert. And you gave him the pick, which, by the way, that kid was on cloud nine for I think like a week. But something really emerged for me because before doing this work full time, I was in medical device sales, and I was a national sales director. So I traveled the country and I was gone every week. And it was the hardest thing in the world for me. I remember when Ethan would be like 6 years old and you'd see my suitcase out and you'd be like, "Are you leaving again?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got," and he would get so upset and cry and like it would upset me. But the feeling and the thought that emerged for me when I was watching you guys play was, seeing that through your eyes, right? Seeing the crowd through your eyes. Because I know you guys' heart, and I know you're all family men and you're good men. And the thing that I thought about was it's got to be hard for these guys at times to be on the road this long, to look out at the crowd and see families. And it's a reminder that, like, I'm here, I'm doing work that I love, but man, I miss my family. Seeing that. Is that accurate?
I think it actually, like, when you're creating moments on stage and you can see the families kind of celebrate those moments, or just they're taking something positive away from that. I think for me, it honestly makes it feel like I'm out here away from my family, and at least I'm doing that. At least that's happening, right? And if I can't be with my kids, but at least we're bringing families together, it doesn't really make me sad. I think it makes me happy, and it makes me feel worthwhile if I'm feeling sad, right? So, but I could see how that maybe maybe the next time we play a show and I'm gone for a long time, I look out there and I'm going to be like, oh wow,
Yeah. Gee,
like, I
thanks,
wish.
Larry. Such a jackass. Put that in my head.
But for the most part, I take it as like, okay, well, this is great. At least we're doing this. At least we're leaving a positive impact on a family or a kid.
That's cool, man. And that's a really cool thought and perspective. And, um, last question I have for you is I'd like to actually just take you through a quick visualization.
Sure.
Um, let's fast forward the tape 10 years from now.
Okay.
You're married for 10 more years. You're 10 years older. Grayson's 10. I'm sorry, 20. Dean is 18.
Jesus.
You're right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're sitting at dinner. Your wife is to your right. Grayson's to your left, and Dean is at the other end of the table. and y'all hold hands
Hmm.
and you ask your family a question. You look at your wife, look at Grayson and Dean and say, guys, what are the most meaningful memories and connections that we have made over the last 10 years that have meant the most to you? What do you think they would be telling you?
So a lot of the memories that we've been making together have been centered around hockey, right? I mean, travel sports, if you're not in travel sports, it's a whole nother,
As a whole world, yeah.
it's a whole nother world, right? And it becomes a lifestyle, right? And you're every weekend you're going to a Courtyard Marriott or a Spring Hill Suites or whatever, in kind of these small towns where they have rinks and there's tournaments and stuff like that. And we've created so many memories just from these silly trips that people think are insane, right? People are like, I don't understand why you guys even do that. Like, it's just crazy. And then sometimes you guys are separated because they both play travel. And I'm constantly with my oldest because I'm coaching on his team, and my wife is with my youngest, and we're divided. Sometimes it comes together where one of the kids doesn't have anything, but we travel as a family and we all try to go, right? Um, this past weekend, we had a show in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania at Hollywood Casino with 311. And this past weekend was one of the first tournaments for my oldest, and it was in Denver. So I was supposed to fly with him. Um, but then the show came up. So my wife has to go with him. And then my youngest didn't have any show scheduled. So I'm like, I'm just going to take Dean with me. He's going to be my assistant. We're going to go to the show. I'm going to drive up there, and then spend the night, and we'll drive back. Next thing I know, his schedule comes out and he has 2 games in Delaware the day of the show. And it's about 2 hours away from the concert. So I go with him to the games. We spent all day in Delaware, and then his last game ended at 4:15, and we were out the rink by like 5, driving straight to the show. I had to miss sound check. Brought him with me, and he came to the show, and he ended up sitting side stage, and just I didn't think he was going to make it through the show. I thought he was going to pass out because he didn't sleep in the car, and he just played 2 hockey games. But he ended up staying the whole time, and he had the greatest time ever, right? And so I guess what I'm trying to say is like these little memories of what hockey has like done for our family and these trips and stuff like that. They remember the funniest things that just you would think are just like, oh, we're staying in a Courtyard Marriott, right? Like, big deal. Like, they think it's the Ritz. They think it's the Four Seasons. They don't care. We're in a new place and we're sleeping in new beds. We got a new room. There's kids everywhere running around. Like, I honestly think those are, and like, even like for me, my wife, to be able to like kind of see that and travel with them and see like the little simple things that I wouldn't get excited about, that they're just so happy about. I think those are the memories that like we laugh about and that we take to heart. Specifically, of course, there's like championship games and like cheering for your kids and then comebacks and stuff like that. That's great and all, but I think it's kind of these silly memories that we have of things that you wouldn't think are is anything special, but the fact that they think it's special and they're thanking us for these silly things, I think those are the things that they would probably look back on. Dad, remember that time we were in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and you had the show? We went to this game, and then we went to here and came to the concert. Um, I think those are kind of the big memories. I would love to say it's when the whole family came to our concert at Merriweather, or everyone came to the show. Um, and I think they like that too, but I think ultimately it's kind of like these little moments that stick in their heads, you know? Like even when we're traveling and I walk into a venue that I haven't been into a long time, and even like some of these small clubs, like when we were first getting started, like I remember certain things about those clubs and those venues that are so stupid, but they just kind of bring back a good feeling and a good memory of like, oh, I remember when we played this club and this happened and that happened. So, you know, I think for them it's just like a lot of these little moments that they remember. I think that's what they would bring up, and I probably wouldn't remember
So I'm 6 years ahead of you in
them.
raising young men, right? I can is that pretty accurate?
Yeah.
That is accurate, especially now that like especially over the past 6 years, since Ethan's 16, and you know there are things that we'll talk about as far as memories, and it doesn't even hit my radar, and I'm like, and it's the simple
Right,
things, and I'm like, wait, how do you remember that? And he's like, oh yeah, and then this and then this. I was like, oh my gosh, but you're right. It isn't necessarily. Have you guys been to Disney yet?
we have not.
Okay. Well, first of all, you need a home equity line of credit to go. So just a
Yeah.
heads up there, right? So we went to Disney, and dude, I will never forget this. It wasn't you and Mason, but it was Lost on Colton. You spend a gazillion dollars on these park passes, and you're fighting crowds, and it's all this other
Yep.
stuff, right? And then you ask the kids on the way home, like, what was the most memorable part of Disney for you? And they're like, the pool at the hotel, and you're like, what? Right. But to them, like that was gargantuan, right? And
Yep.
to be quite honest, right, it doesn't matter. Right. It doesn't matter at all. It's
Right.
to them, it's a big thing. And we were all together, and that's the end goal. So
Yeah.
I love that, man. Well,
Yeah. And who you're with, right? It's like
yeah,
who they're with, and that's the impression, that's the imprint that they got at that moment that made them
yeah.
remember that, you know.
I agree, man. Well, as we wrap up here, I just want the last question I want to ask is what are you most excited about for 2023? Like what is I know you guys just launched a new album, which by the way, I love the new album.
Thank you.
Uh downloaded it as soon as we left the concert here in St. Louis. And but what are you guys most excited about for 2023?
Um, well, we still have this record that we're touring on, and I'm excited to see where some of the songs go. I'm excited for the summer tour um, that we have planning. Can't really announce anything yet, but we're working on something. Uh, I think it's going to be great. And also like with the family, we have some trips planned. Um, I think it's really important to kind of like plan a vacation, something that is not necessarily centered around like something that you guys always do or that we always do. Something that's new, a place that's new, and just kind of setting that side that aside for family time to do something that everyone like loves doing together. You know, uh, we ski. We got a big skiing trip planned.
Nice.
Outside of the silly mountains that we have around Washington D.C. Just going somewhere that we can all do together. I'm really looking forward to that. Um, I have an older friend who told me the reason why he takes his family skiing all the time every year, and that's like such a big trip, is because you can sit with your kids. And I think that's just something like when they get older. But he told me when you're on that chairlift and it's just you and your kids, like he goes, it's the strangest thing. They just start talking, and he goes, the amount of QT and bonding time that I have with my kids on that stupid chairlift, just going up the mountain. He's like, that's why I plan these trips.
Mm,
Um, right now, my kids tell me everything, and they're not really to that point where dad's not cool, and I don't want to talk to him about this because he'll never understand. But I think, planting the seed and just kind of taking what he said, and luckily we all ski and we all enjoy snow in the mountains and stuff like that. So, um, really looking forward to that. And it doesn't always have to be that; it could be just something. But I think it's that one family vacation that you have to like carve out time for. And that can be really hard in our industry because sometimes shows pop up. You got blackout dates that you're telling management, hey, from this day to this day, I'm not doing anything, right? Then all of a sudden the show pops up and it's like a big show. It's a big thing, right? And you got to make a decision. You got to be flexible. So, getting back to the whole balancing, juggling thing and priorities, um, you got to navigate that. But yeah, family time, vacation
That's awesome.
together.
That's so cool. We're big traveling family as well. We actually we make excuses to actually leave St. Louis to go see you guys in other cities, and we also love to vacation. We haven't skied yet though, but we have we love our getaways and our adventures. Kind of a quick funny side note, we actually saw you guys, and me and Ethan flew to North Carolina to go see you guys back in 2020. It was a week before everything shut down, so like it was
Mhm.
literally that but week before, which was kind of nostalgic as you talk about 2020. By the way, if you guys are playing at the Red Rocks, that's our entire family's bucket list to see you guys at the Red Rocks. We have yet to see any concert at the Red Rocks, but we want to. So, if you guys are playing there next year, we'll definitely see you there.
Okay.
As far as we close out here, though, where can the audience, find you, the music, if they want to follow you on social? What's the best way for them to connect and follow?
Sure. Liveoar.com is the website. You can find anything OER related as far as tour and shows like that. How to find music. Um, you can download everything from, you know, old shows that have been archived on the site. So it's a great place for anything OAR. As far as my socials, I'm usually pretty active on Instagram, and that's just at Richard underscore on. Um, and that's pretty much all I do. I mean, I'm on Twitter too, and I usually kind of use Twitter as just kind of like keeping in touch and stuff like that,
Right.
or just keeping up to date with what's going on. It's funny though, because you kind of create your own world on your socials, right? You can choose who you want to follow and who you don't want to follow. But Twitter is, a lot of our fans are active on Twitter, and just to kind of hear what they thought about this or this set list and stuff like that. That's a great place too as well.
Awesome. Well, guys, not to worry. We're going to have all the links in the show notes for you. All you have to do is head on over to thedadedge.com/398 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/398. We'll have Richard's Instagram in there, his Twitter handle, as well as the OAR live website for you guys. So you can see their tour dates, you can buy their swag, you can become a VIP member, all kinds of really cool stuff that we've done in the past as well. I always close out the show saying, go out and live legendary. I don't even know if you know that, but you're going to say it this time, Ethan. But before we do that, Richard, thank you so much for coming on, man. This was so cool.
That was an honor. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I love talking about things that you know that don't typically happen in interviews when people request them. It's usually just very band focused. So thanks for letting me get personal about it.
Thanks for opening up. Your authenticity was off the charts today, and really appreciate you just opening up this other side to you that many people don't get to see. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
You bet. All right, Ethan.
Oh, go out and live legendary.
Let's go, Ethan. Nice.
That's awesome.